Alright, moving on with the quadratic formula. I'm going to have you add just a couple more things to your note card while we're at it. Let's add these directions at the bottom of the page before we begin solving. So when you do come across a quadratic equation that you can't factor, here's step 1. Move all terms to one side of equals with 0 on other side. And step 2, list A, B, and C. And I'll show you how to do that in just a moment. And part 3, simplify. And there's more details to that step, and we'll learn how to do those in just a bit. So let's go to the next page and see what our first quadratic equation is going to look like. Alright, here we go. By the way, there's not enough room usually to do these problems. I'll try to squeeze this one in here, but from now on we'll probably go to another sheet of paper. Alright, so first we check, do we have the equation in ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0 form? Now, whether the 0 is on the left or the right doesn't matter. But basically, is your x squared term, your x, and your plane number all on one side? And they are. The x squared term, the x term, and the plane number all on one side, and on the other side we have 0. And when I'm talking about sides, I mean the sides with the equal sign. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to make a list of where's my A, where's my B, and where's my C. So looking at the form of a quadratic equation, A is the number that's multiplied by the x squared term. B is the number that's multiplied by the x term. And C is the number that stands alone, the constant term. And this is when we have a plus sign here and a plus sign there. So that's going to add just a little bit more difficulty to this if there's a minus sign, and I'll explain that. So off to the side, here we go. We're going to make our list. A is, what is A? Well, it's the coefficient of the x squared term. So A is 2. B is, now here we have to be careful, it doesn't say plus 7x as in our general form, it says minus 7 times x. So your B value is a negative 7 because it's not a plus sign there. So B is negative 7. And finally, C is a plus 4. Make that list every time you start one of these problems. Now we grab our index card with the quadratic formula on it, and we keep it handy as we begin to fill in all the values in their spots. So we start with x equals, because this formula is just going to give us the x value that works to make the equation equal to 0. So x equals, now first we write down the opposite of your B value. Notice how I say opposite of B instead of negative B? The reason I say that is because if B is already negative, you might forget to take the opposite of it. So if I look at my B value, it's a negative 7, I want to write down the opposite of that. So I write down positive 7. And then we've got the plus or minus sign, plus or minus, and then a nice big square root sign because we're going to be putting 2 terms under it. And what goes in there? B squared. Now please use pockets for anything with a negative sign on it that's being multiplied or added or whatever. So it'll be negative 7 squared, B squared, subtract. 4 is always in the formula. Always, always, always. Every time you do it, there will be a 4 there. And then we need a pocket for A and a pocket for C. Alright, so A is 2. Put it in the first pocket. And C is 4. Put it in the second pocket. Now, don't forget the bottom of the ratio. Draw a quotient bar, or dividing bar, all the way from under the 7 across underneath the square root sign. And underneath goes 2 times whatever A is. 2 times parentheses, and my A value is 2. Now we have to simplify this mess, and it works best if you can do some of the simplifying without a calculator, if possible. Alright, so I'm going to rewrite the expression. The 7 is going to stay out front, and I'm going to get my square root sign ready And I think I'll simplify the bottom sign first because that's very easy. 2 times 2 is 4, and that way I won't forget to bring the bottom of my quotient with. Now under the square root sign, negative 7 squared is negative 7 times itself. This should always be a positive result here. You should never get a negative number when you're squaring b, because if it's negative already, times itself will be positive. If it's positive already, it'll stay positive. Now here we have 4 times 2 times 4, so that's 8 times 4 is 32. Now you can use your calculator for what's under the square root sign and put it in just as you see it. Just be careful to use parentheses around anything negative. Alright, let's take another step to simplifying this. 7 out front again, plus or minus. Now let's do the 49 subtract 32. And that should be 17, right? All over 4. And then the last step is to break this into 2 solutions. Remember how most of our quadratic equations have always had 2 solutions? There will be 2 solutions here also. One of them will be x equals 7 plus, notice the plus or minus sign there, 7 plus the square root of 17 over 4. And the other solution is going to be 7 minus, see the minus sign underneath there? That gives us the second solution, all over 4. So you break it into 2 pieces, one with a plus sign, boom, one with a minus sign, because we want 2 different answers for our quadratic equation. Alright, at this point we can do one of 2 things. We can pick up our calculator and calculate this, or we can break it down further into 2 pieces. On this one I think I'm going to go right to my calculator. So because I want to make sure everything on top gets divided by this 4, I'm going to start out with a pair of parentheses, and I'm going to put in 7 plus my square root sign with the 17. Now you must absolutely close those parentheses, and now I need another closing parentheses for the parenthesis I started with here, so that I have matching pairs of parentheses. So that'll have my calculator calculate all the top first and then divide by the 4 on the bottom. If you're doing this correctly, you should get approximately 2.78, and if we round that 0 up, 1. 2.781. Alright, now when we do the other one, I'm going to re-enter it, but put subtraction here. Again, use parentheses around the top. Now, because I have a cool calculator, I can go back and I can change that plus sign here to the minus sign and without having to enter the whole expression again. So if you have a calculator where you can go back to the last calculation and change things, just go back up and change 7 plus square root of 17 to 7 minus. Otherwise, just re-enter the whole thing. Alright, and I get 0.719. So x equals 0.719. Now these are approximate answers because we've had to round them, but they give us a pretty good estimate of the solution. When we come back, we'll do the second problem.